All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today on the rise of super apps. My name is Stephen Ochs. I'm the head of demand gen here at Bitrise. You may have recognized me from a few of our last webinars as I've had the privilege to be the moderator for some great discussions. With me today, I have Jeremy from Bitrise and Shantanu from LambdaTest. Jeremy and Shantanu, why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Jeremy. I'm one of the product managers at Bitrise. I'm responsible for our core CI platform. And before I worked at Bitrise, I worked as a product manager in some other businesses, notably one that was focused on testing mobile apps on real devices, actually. Before that, I spent a bit of time working at eBay. So that's a little bit about me. Hello.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shantanu. I'm working as a senior product manager with LambdaTest, basically leading the real devices product on APM, Espresso, and CICD testing. Before LambdaTest, I had worked as product manager in edtech organizations, and I've been a developer in my past life as well. So hello to everyone.
Awesome. Thanks for the introduction, guys. So today, as you may or may not know, we're going to talk about super apps and any integration challenges there may be, challenges with QA, speed and agility, security and compliance, as well as any future trends in relation to super apps. And with that, we'll kick off the conversation with Jeremy.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, let's just get clear on what we're talking about here. So for the avoidance of doubt, what is a super app? So a super app is essentially a one-stop shop for consumers to achieve a whole bunch of the normal operations of life in one place. So there are some really good examples from China. So for example, WeChat is a very good example as one of the biggest super apps in the world. Started out life as a messaging app, moved into social, but now there's parts of WeChat which deal with like food delivery, e-commerce, financial stuff, all kinds of things available in that one ecosystem. And the point of a super app from a consumer benefit point of view is really to promise a better user experience, so more convenience, so no switching between your messaging app and your social media app and your food ordering app. That can all be done in one place in a very familiar way, and also a very consistent and personalized experience across all of these areas. And the benefits for the businesses are obviously just retaining customers and growing customer base as well through a familiar brand. So yeah, there are some really good examples of super apps in the Eastern Hemisphere. They've been slightly slower to take off in the Western Hemisphere. Although I noticed recently that now my Uber app here in London, where I am, contains the option for Uber Eats, so I can get food through the Uber ride-sharing app. But I can also now book a holiday and all kinds of other and train tickets and whatnot as well. So yeah, there's certainly a trend in this area. Yeah, Shantanu, did I miss anything or any other examples of super apps you'd like to highlight here?
No, right, absolutely. I think you've given enough examples to start with, at least. And one thing that you've mentioned is that most of the super applications have been in the eastern region of the world, and there have been very few examples in the West. And I think one of the reasons for that could be a lot related to the compliance that we find being more in the developed countries in the West, whereas there's rather less compliance from the government on the eastern side of the world. A lot of the super applications we see in India as well that have been coming up, including a few examples such as Swiggy, again, which is a food delivery ecosystem, but also has other aspects to it. Apart from that, there's also Angel One that we've seen recently come up, which is more in financial services. So I think those are really good examples that we've seen in the past. And it's really interesting to see that most of the applications, super apps, are currently in the eastern region of the world, and there's been very less movement on the West. And I think talking just about applications from a development or QA, or let's say the entire software lifecycle perspective, I think there are a lot of challenges that come along with super apps as we consider or compare it to a normal native application. And just to think about from a development perspective or a QA perspective, it's just the sheer size of the application that they have to consider, the microservices or the differentiation in architecture that they have to consider, just even before starting the development of a super application. And let's say if I dive into the QA perspective of it, there is, again, the part of region testing, network complexities. There's different parts to which directly affect other workflows of the application as well. So hence, there's a huge comprehensive testing required, which needs to consider multiple scenarios. In fact, one of the major challenges, and I had the honor of speaking with Vijay, who's an engineering manager at Swiggy, was that they face a lot of time spent in the test data setup. Since they have a huge application, there's a lot of parts to it. Just to get the test data ready, that entire setup takes a huge chunk of the QA time, and that just increases the entire duration of the QA cycle. And along with that, they just have to consider the performance of their application on various devices. And I think that just becomes a huge issue for the developer of the application while doing the QA testing as well. And I think just because of the size of the application, another challenge that does come up is the build time. The time it takes from moving the application from the developer to the QA, the entire build cycle itself takes a lot of time. And I think CI/CD plays a huge role there as well, Jeremy. So what do you think, Jeremy, in terms of CI/CD?
Yeah, absolutely.
What is different in super apps?
Yeah, I think it's all about scale, isn't it? And it would be interesting in the chat actually, if as we're talking, if you've encountered, or if you've been involved in building super apps or even really big apps at scale. I mean, there's a question in the chat already about whether Facebook is a super app. I think the definition of super app, as far as I can tell, is fairly loose, but you could certainly call it that way. But anyway, anyone with the experience of working on a super app, would be great to hear from you. Like, what was difficult from a QA perspective? What was difficult from a CICD or just a development perspective? It would be great to hear some examples. But to talk, whilst we're talking about CICD and build speed, yeah, like this, obviously, as you scale an application up, everything becomes much more complicated. And, you know, CICD, if you're going to have a large scale application, you will have probably adopted some kind of CI type activities already, right? Because this allows you to have a faster release cycle. You can, you know, you reduce the reliance on manual steps. You can parallelize work. I think anybody who's building a large application is going to be taking that approach already. And then obviously, you know, you've got the benefits of, you know, a scalable infrastructure underneath all of that as well. But there are challenges, even with a good CI/CD strategy. If you're dealing with a super app, which is one thing I didn't mention at the start, really, is, you know, it's a collection of micro apps or mini apps which are kind of glued together into one ecosystem with the same kind of user interface and experience attached to them. As soon as you have a larger code base, yeah, it's going to be a lot easier to break things. So having short turnaround times on you know, on every pull request is very important. And then Shantanu mentioned long build times. Yeah, the bigger the app, the bigger the build time. And then, but there are things you can do to try and help with this. So I was talking to one of our customers who's building, I think you can legitimately say it's a super app. They've employed a sort of micro front end architecture. So what that means is that, you know, every one of these mini apps is deployed, you know, can be deployed independently and tested independently. Or it can be glued together into the super app for an end-to-end test. But having those small fragmented pieces, which actually even below the layer of mini app, so even shared functions like push notifications or the ability to do purchases, which might be shared by many different mini apps, they're kind of like granular microservices, basically, which can be tested independently. So that one team doesn't break another team's work, and can be pushed together at any moment in time. But that involves quite a lot of setup and an investment in thinking about the strategy around your continuous integration as well.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
In fact, I had a similar conversation with another one of our customers who's developing their application. They're a VP for QA there, and they also mentioned that they have their entire application divided in SDKs, and essentially each module they are testing separately, and whatever changes are being done there, they are being managed completely separately without affecting the entire integration of the application. And I think such a structure becomes really important when we have such a large size application. It just helps break down the problem easily and then focus on separate modules individually. And then we can go ahead and build the entire integration and just do a basic sanity to proceed and release the entire application.
Absolutely. I think the other challenge you have with the super app kind of architecture is dependency management. So you're likely to have more dependencies to manage. Updating dependencies, avoiding conflicts, that's going to be important. Another customer I spoke to said that they'd adopted a monorepo kind of setup to try and alleviate that problem as well. So that's obviously something that you could use as a strategy to aid with dependency management, but obviously you have to weigh that against some of the challenges that come with operating in a monorepo as well. So like anything in life, nothing comes for free. None of these things are easy, but the payoff can be huge if you get this right. If you look at the scale of some of these super apps.
Yeah, Jeremy, I was actually going to ask to dive in on that a little bit. So, we've talked a lot about, some of the challenges and intricacies that come with kind of a more complex development, right, with the super app. But like, what are some of those payoffs that super apps brings that makes kind of that juice worth the squeeze, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of benefits for the companies that are involved in creating these, right? So, but it needs to be there needs to be some kind of symbiotic relationship with customers as well. So the promise is really like, if you've got a trusted brand, a brand that you trust, if you're a consumer and you trust that brand, and that brand delivers for you in whatever way. So let's say it's Amazon, for the sake of argument. If they can deliver for you on e-commerce, they can deliver for you on entertainment as well. If they started setting up Amazon Bank, maybe you'd be happy to get involved in that as well, because you trust that this organization is sound effectively, and you trust the brand. Amazon might not be the best example for user experience. Actually, maybe Apple would have been a better one. But the benefit for the customer is that seamless user experience, right? Something they're very familiar with, and there's no kind of barrier to entry for moving between.
Right, but I think that's a great.
Go ahead, Shantanu.
Yeah.
I'm saying Amazon is actually a great example for India, because they have set up their financial system, the UPI payments in India directly within their e-commerce application. They have created a separate module out of it, and they are like, it's been more than a couple of years since they've started that in India. So I think it's a great example here.
I was going to say, I think it also applies in the US. Like, I use Amazon obviously to buy every random thing in my life, but also, I use Whole Foods and their grocery delivery, right? Instead of me going to like Instacart and Uber Eats and some of the other services, which Uber Eats I use anyways, I trust Amazon more because of more of that relationship I built, right? And
yeah,
I end up buying more things as a result, and it's all just in a seamless experience. I don't have to manage multiple payment systems and everything else. It's like, okay, my Amazon wallet's all set up. Everything I'm going to buy is going to be through my Prime card as well, and it's just kind of there.
Right.
So I think that's a good example.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think I questioned myself because I was about to talk about awesome user experience, and Amazon may not all the boxes on that front, but yeah, I think convenience and trust are the big things, really. Yeah. Shantanu,
and apart from convenience, I think another reason that basically I think Jeremy mentioned in the beginning as well is just having that entire customer base all together for you. So as a business, if you're going for a generic industry, which it makes a lot of sense for you to build a super app, It is going to be resource intensive, 100%. It is going to need a lot of security and compliance for sure, but it's going to be worth it as long as you have that entire user base with you and your customer acquisition cost really drills down. And that just helps you bring all the customers in one place directly and using cross products.
Absolutely, yeah. It can really. I mean, that's why like these big companies are driving towards this, right? More and more customer acquisition, more growth. But
Right.
consumers have to get something out of it, or else it just doesn't work.
Absolutely. All right, I think we have a couple of questions as well. How to ensure quality with multiple deliverables from different and interconnected teams, which would cause many side effects. Right, I think it's a little tricky. Initially, as we mentioned, that there are a lot of different organizations who are doing separate modular structure and they're having separate applications. And that really helps each individual teams to at least have their own set of structure properly created. And if those teams are bifurcated, they're having quality checks and CICD checks in place properly. And then they're integrating into a complete application. A basic sanity or basic workflow run can also help individuals do that properly. So just division of labor here by creating separate modules, either through SDKs or through any other structure or micro front-end structure, that can really help alleviate the problem, I believe. What do you think, Jordan?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. Like this is one of the big challenges, isn't it? And quality is everything, because if you want to be in the business of encouraging more people onto your platform, then you've got to get that trust level up. So
Right.
I wholeheartedly agree with that approach, and I'd be interested to know if the person who asked the question has been burned by by this kind of experience. I don't know if you want to reply at some point, Danilo, but it'd be interesting to hear if that's just an open question or whether you have some anecdote you might want to share with us there.
Absolutely.
Should we have a look at some of these other questions? So Farhan said, in Pakistan, telecom operators are creating super apps for all their VAS and fintech products. So yeah, I don't know if that's, I mean, that's kind of news to me. I don't know if that's a trend that's just in Pakistan, or whether telecom operators are looking towards super apps in general. And I'm not sure why that particular business vertical would be looking that way. Actually, I've not heard of telecom operators in Europe, for example, doing that sort of thing. But it's an interesting vision.
Right. I think we do have telecom operators in India as well doing exactly the same thing. All the value-added services and even the fintech products they're adding in the single application. And since telecom operators is one of the business who have huge number of customers, it just makes it very easy for them to switch into different products and get that added directly into their super application. But it's a great example for them. Thank you for sharing that.
Another good question I think we have is mobile application, requires to comply with, the store policies. And with 2024 and 2025 being a year which stores are prioritizing their policies, what tips do you guys have for better coordination between super app deployment and store policies? Could we consider a super app structure as a risk? One of the examples, Apple used to have a high trending for single and simple goal apps.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it is a risk, because just because Apple and the stores, they obviously check the apps. Okay, so I think the bigger the app you put in, I guess the larger the chance that that's going to get rejected or it's going to fail on some compliance area. So I'd say that's definitely it feels like the bigger the app is, the higher the risk is always going to be. In terms of like advising on how better to coordinate, that's a good question. And I'm not sure if I have an answer straight off the top of my head for that. I'm not sure, like, so as far as I know, Apple, you know, they don't, there's no way that you can like validate the micro apps or the components of your super app. It's the app that goes into the app store, and therefore that is the thing that needs to be checked out. So I don't know, like, Shantanu, do you have any thoughts about how we can make this easier, or how customers can make this easier?
I think the only major consideration here is that at the end of the day, a super app is just really a huge application, a native application. And Apple, being Apple, they have a lot of strict compliance checks for publishing any application on App Store. And I think the only tip would be to ensure that your quality checks and security checks are properly in place, since that becomes a huge issue with super applications. As there's a lot more data in transit in super applications because of the number of modules that are there, I think it just makes sense to have that security check at every single module that you have, every single API that you're calling within the application, to ensure that the data in transit is secure. I think that would just really help out. But to be honest, I think that would be one of the ways to do it. There would definitely be others as well. But that does bring us to the point of security and compliance and checks for super applications, which have been becoming really strict, and I think could be one of the reasons why we've not seen a lot of super applications in the West. Jeremy, would you maybe want to discuss more about the security check?
Security and compliance piece?
Sorry,
you know, and the challenges there. I was just saying, do we want to dive more into the security and compliance and the challenges there, since, you know, Shantanu, you brought that up?
Sure. Yeah, like if you look at the research on what consumers think about super apps, the biggest single concern they have is around information security. Yeah, because obviously, you know, you're with a larger app, you're spreading your personal information across a much bigger surface area. Therefore, that, you know, there are potentially bigger opportunities for a breach. So it's not surprising that consumers are concerned about this. And apart from there being more data in transit, which is a major problem and challenge here, there's other things to consider as well, like storage. Like you're gonna, if you have a super app, you're likely to be relying on more and more third-party integrations. Like, how secure are they? Are there attack vectors like outside of your control? It becomes very tricky, and so there's no easy answer to that, unfortunately. But I think, you know, these big companies that have super apps, they will have a very, you know, they'll have a rigorous security policy. And I think also because compliance, these kinds of things are the kinds of things that can, if you get them wrong, can kill your app, you can kill your business. Like having a robust strategy about how you roll back as well. So how can you come back from a failure? That's always a challenge with mobile app development. But I think you've got to really carefully think about this and strategize it properly.
Right, I absolutely agree with you, Jeremy, on that, because I think that just becomes one of the most important piece. And the bigger the application, the more the security risk there is. As simple as that.
And then, you know, what would you guys say some of the biggest future trends with super apps? You know, are there industries that are leaning towards it? What's next to consider with super app development? What should the audience keep in mind, right? You know, and prepare for in the future if they are considering a future app, if they want to get into super apps. Wow, word salad for me. But you know, just super apps just feel very loaded. But what are the future trends that, like, if you guys had to advise the audience to stay ahead of, you know, and really be on top of, what would those be?
There definitely seems to be like a kind of business push towards super app. I mean, I don't know if I think some people are using this term quite loosely. Like I was reading an article today about Marks and Spencer's, who's a famous, supermarket and high street store in the UK. They already have like a banking offering, and they're talking about bringing these things together in one digital ecosystem, which they're calling a super app. But that's like two things that they do. So that's a bit loose. But I think there's definitely, if you read around the internet, there's definitely push from companies. They want to have more of that share of market. They want to be able to have a lower cost of acquisition. So I think we're going to see more and more. We see it already, even like with the big Western tech companies as well, moving towards that. So I think that's going to happen because the businesses want to do that, and they can do a good job for consumers as well. I mean, in terms of the future trends, I think it would be obvious to talk about AI because everyone's talking about AI. But I think where it really lends itself in the world of the super app is like better personalization. I think that's really where it can help. If you know information about somebody's financial behaviors, then maybe you can advise them on some other aspects of their life as well. So obviously there's a lot of work to do to get that right, but I think that's definitely one place where something like AI can actually be useful. I don't know what you think, Shantanu, about AI or about any other like trends that are coming along the road.
No, right. I absolutely agree that definitely because of the demand currently of convenience to at the end have everything at the fingertips and maybe not switch between different applications, super apps is something that we will see definitely an increase in trend in the future. But there's also the piece of security compliance that comes into picture and user experience challenges. And I see that Luke here has mentioned a similar comment as well, that it becomes really hard to keep a coherent UX across all the different parts of a super application. And in some cases, we've also seen that there is an ecosystem around super applications where we're allowing others as well to contribute towards it. And that just creates an even bigger problem for user experience. And those are the challenges that actually just make businesses think whether they want to go ahead and keep using a super application or bifurcate it and divide and focus on single pieces of it. And similarly, in terms of AI as well, definitely personalization will help. And it will really help in understanding the user behavior and advising them as well. On the other hand, AI, even that we're seeing currently, is able to give best results when it's industry specific. For example, in healthcare, if there are large LLM models which are focused on healthcare, they're able to give us much better, deeper information rather than a generic model that we see right now. And hence, I also believe that as AI moves forward over the next maybe 5 or 10 years, we'll see, in fact, consolidation of applications together, and that might actually lead to a decrease in the overall super apps that we see out there in the market. So it's really hard to judge right now what might happen in the future, but it seems we have points for both increase and decrease as well for super applications.
I think Luke had actually a really good question, in the chat, and I'll put it up for everyone to see. But are there any examples of apps that were super that decided to unbundle and go into smaller apps? For example, YouTube, has their dedicated apps, instead of one larger, app ecosystem. I was trying to really think of any I could think of, but I guess like technically, like while Uber, we used that example earlier, like Uber and Uber Eats are integrated, they still are separate applications in the store, which is kind of interesting. Why not just have the holistic Uber app and retire Uber Eats potentially? But wanted to know if you guys had any examples that you could think of.
Not on the top of my mind, to be honest, but it is definitely an interesting point raised here, Luke. But what I believe is that it actually ends up being a business use case rather than anything else. having a creator application separately and rather than having YouTube Music and YouTube separately is definitely because of the end use case. The total group, the user market currently, I think is a little different for somebody who's using YouTube, and somebody who's using YouTube Music. So I honestly believe that this is just a business use case rather than anything else. Moreover, having separate applications again results in having low-sized applications which can run on older mobile devices as well, which might not have, let's say, 8 GBs of RAM. And even devices which have low RAM, it's easy to run on those. And that just helps YouTube application to at least have a much huge user base than having a consolidated large size application, which might not result in that. What do you think, Jeremy?
Yeah, I'm struggling to think of some good examples as well of like genuine super apps that are unbundled. I think, I don't know, we could see that happen, right? Because I think the trade-off with the super app is that, you know, does everything either get too generic in the user experience? Like, do you really need a really specialized app for a specialized situation? In which case you might want to have your own breakout app for that. And also, you know, the cost of development at some point might become too much. I don't know, but it's certainly, the trend is certainly to be go super than to go away from super. And I can't think of a recent example of someone who's really unbundled. I'd be interested if anyone in the audience can. And yeah, so I think for the time being, at least the trend seems to be in one way, but you never know what's going to happen around the corner.
One example that I can think of is essentially Facebook. If you see, we have Facebook and Facebook Messenger, right? Facebook Messenger initially when they launched used to be a part of Facebook, but then they did unbundle it and kept it separate. Now Messenger, the messaging app of Facebook, is completely separate altogether. Now the reason behind it is something that obviously we can explore further into, but I think that is one example that I can think of.
Good point.
Other, so if someone hasn't, built a super app and they have many applications, what would you guys recommend for, that developer, that organization to think about, as they consider their future development, right? And should they plan to go super? Like, when does it make sense to, and when does it make sense to not, like, kind of plan to go super as you're thinking of your development life cycle and your future planning, right? And you have multiple applications that have done well as a standalone. Like, when does it make sense to combine them into that one super application?
That's a good question. I think this is largely a business decision, right? So this isn't really a technical decision. Is the business sufficiently scaled, and does this business offer sufficient range of products and services that it would make sense to try and bring it together into, well, it would make sense to pay the cost of bringing everything together. So, there are a bunch of things you need to consider as a business before you do that. I think, you need to be at a reasonable amount of scale. I don't think anyone sort of starts out the tiny little startup with a super app.
Right.
You build your brand and then you go for it, right? So you need to have the resources to be able to deal with that. You need to have the resources to be able to deal with all of these, like, compliance issues, et cetera. So it's, for me, it's definitely a business decision to go into that. And then, the technical folks have to figure out how to make it work, as usual.
Right.
Right.
I think a lot of considerations technically as well majorly becomes, of course, the scalability, because if you're creating a super application, you're creating it for a large user base. You're thinking that it's going to be used by a lot of folks out there. And scalability becomes one of the most important aspects. And again, second would be, which I think is modularity, that you are able to separate out your super application easily, and it allows easy integration of services. That just helps you maintain your entire super app rather easily. And the last part, which we generally see as least focused on, is the user experience. Because of the different modules, it's generally the user experience gets twisted in different modules of the application. And that is something that really needs to be focused on while building super apps, which I think is a big consideration while at least developing it. But on the other hand, whether to create it or not I completely agree with Jeremy that it's completely a business decision. You won't be creating a super application as a startup or if you have a niche market focus.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Sorry.
go ahead, Jeremy.
No, I was just going to cap that off by saying, yeah, there are lots of reasons why you wouldn't make a super app. Like, I think, yeah, you just need to have that scale, right? And you need to have that strategic positioning to become a bigger brand. And that's the thing that's going to drive it.
Awesome. Well, we're pretty much at the time, guys. Is there any, kind of parting thoughts you want to leave the audience with?
I would, but there were, in the poll, I think there were actually quite a few, about a third of the people on the call are currently developing a super app. So I'm really intrigued to hear a bit more about some of the challenges that those people have come up with in the past. I don't know if there's a place where people can leave comments after the event, Stephen, but yeah, my parting thought is to learn a bit more about creating a super app and their challenges and how we can potentially help by improving CICD here at Bitrise. That's my kind of main thing. If the trend is going in this direction, how can we help organizations fulfill that desire? That's what I'm interested in.
So I'm leaving my email address in the chat. So any comments or questions you want the panel to answer or us to do some thought around, please email myself and I'll make sure to get an answer back over to all of you. Shantanu, any parting words from you?
Right. I think we covered a lot of items related to super applications, and I agree with Jeremy, and that would be my focus as well. That how maybe the QA part of it, how that can be improved, and how LambdaTest as a platform can help end users test their applications the best they can, and to ensure how we have a complete proper quality assurance, whether it's performance of the application, workflow testing, or functional testing, whatever that is, integrated well so that the end users are easily able to test their super apps and they're able to deliver it to their end users.
Awesome. Well, once again, guys, I really want to thank you for your time today. It's always a pleasure getting to host these, and always great to have new, fresh voices and new, fresh topics to engage with everyone. So I hope our audience enjoyed today's talk, and be on the lookout for our next one. And Jeremy and Shantanu may pop up again. Cheers.
And thank you so much, Stephen, for inviting me. I think it's been a great talk.
My pleasure. And again, everyone, please feel free to email me over any comments or questions you'd love us to dive further into. Always look out at the Bitrise blog. I know LambdaTest has some great resources as well, and we'll be sure to continue to make sure we provide you guys with the resources you need. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.